Captain Velnara's crystalline fingers trembled as the gentle current shuddered violently around her. The Kithara research vessel, elegant as spun glass and twice as fragile, was coming apart at the seams. What had started as a routine scientific expedition to study the mysterious gravitational anomaly in the Kepler void had turned into a nightmare in the span of minutes. The ship's bioluminescent hull flickered like a dying star as massive stress fractures spider-webbed across its surface. The gentle current wasn't built for violence or harsh conditions. Like all Kithara vessels, it was grown rather than constructed, its living metal hull designed to bend and flex with the gentle currents of space. But the gravitational forces tearing at them now were anything but gentle. Hull integrity dropping to 30%, called out Science Officer Tilandra from her station, her melodic voice tight with fear. The Kithara were beings of incredible beauty, their transparent bodies shot through with veins of liquid light that pulsed with their emotions. Right now, those veins blazed orange with terror. Sparks of bioluminescent fluid leaked from cracked conduits overhead, dripping like glowing tears onto the organic control surfaces. The ship's neural network, the living brain that controlled all their systems, was screaming in digital agony. Warning chimes filled the air with haunting melodies that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The artifact's gravitational field is intensifying, Tilandra continued, her forearms dancing over her crystalline controls. It's pulling us in. I can't break free. Through the transparent walls of the bridge, Velnara could see the ancient structure they'd been studying. It hung in space like a frozen scream, all impossible angles and surfaces that hurt to look at directly. The artifact was older than most civilizations, a relic from some long-dead race that had mastered forces the current galaxy barely understood. And now it was killing them. Emergency power to the quantum drives, Velnara ordered, but even as she spoke, she knew it was hopeless. The drives had been damaged in the initial gravitational surge. They were trapped, caught like insects in an invisible web of twisted spacetime. The ship groaned around them, a sound like breaking crystal that echoed through the bioacoustic hull. Sections of the outer membrane were already peeling away, vented into space along with precious atmosphere. The gentle current had perhaps minutes before complete structural collapse. Send the beacon, Velnara whispered to her communications officer, Navigator Calnaris. Standard Galactic Rescue Protocol. Calnaris nodded, her luminescent patches flickering as she composed the message. The distress signal was simple and polite, transmitted on all standard emergency frequencies. It contained their location, the nature of their emergency, and a respectful request for assistance. Any civilized species would recognize it instantly and dispatch a rescue vessel. One ship. Maybe two if they were extremely fortunate. The signal pulsed out into the void, a tiny beacon of hope carrying the desperate plea of a dying crew across the darkness of space. 3 star systems away, the human colony of New Terra was having a typically busy day. The orbital defense station Vigilant hung in space above the planet like a mechanical moon, its sensors constantly sweeping the surrounding space for threats. Humanity had learned the hard way that the galaxy was not a friendly place. Lieutenant Tom Bradley was pulling a double shift in the communications center when the alien signal hit his screens. The young officer had volunteered for extra duty to help pay for his sister's medical treatments back on Earth, and he'd been monitoring deep space channels for the better part of 16 hours. His eyes were burning and his back ached, but the coffee was still working its magic. The incoming transmission made him sit up straight. The signal was unlike anything in their databases, composed of harmonic frequencies that seemed almost musical. Their military translation matrix, designed to decode hostile alien communications, struggled with the elegant patterns. "What the hell is that?" muttered Sergeant Rita Chin from the next station over. She was a veteran of the Proxima Wars, and her hand had instinctively moved to her sidearm when the strange signal appeared. Tom ran the transmission through every filter they had. The computer gave him a dozen different interpretations, none of them certain. It could be a distress call. It could be a coded military transmission. It could even be some kind of trap designed to lure human ships into an ambush. "Admiral," Tom called across the command center to Admiral Jack Morrison, who was reviewing tactical reports at the central holotable. "We've got an unknown contact near Sector 7. Signal's unclear, sir. Could be a distress call, could be something else entirely." Admiral Morrison looked up from his reports. He was a career military man, gray-haired and scarred from a dozen conflicts across human space. 6 months since humanity had been grudgingly accepted into the galactic community, and they were still learning the rules. Most species seem to view humans as dangerous primitives, barely worthy of contact. Morrison walked over to Tom's station, studying the readout with experienced eyes. The signal originated from near the edge of known space, close to one of the ancient artifact sites that dotted the galaxy like breadcrumbs from extinct civilizations. Strategically important territory and potentially dangerous. Analysis? Morrison asked. Unknown, sir. The translation matrix can't get a clean read. Could be peaceful, could be hostile. The signal's coming from coordinates that match an ancient site marked in our star charts. Morrison nodded grimly. Better safe than sorry had kept humanity alive through 2 centuries of interstellar warfare. General quarters, he announced. Deploy the 7th Fleet. Full combat readiness. Captain Velnara watched her scanner with growing confusion as massive energy signatures appeared at the edge of her detection range. The readings were impossible. No rescue vessel should generate that much power. Her crystalline fingers danced across the organic controls, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Captain, Science Officer Tilandra breathed, her forearms frozen over her instruments. I'm reading 300 ships. 300, Captain. The words hit Velnara like a physical blow. 300 ships? For a simple rescue mission? The largest rescue operation in recorded galactic history had involved maybe 12 vessels when the Zentari homeworld had been evacuated during their sun's collapse. This was madness. That can't be right, she whispered. Run the scan again. But even as Tilandra's instruments swept space once more, the readings remained the same. 300 massive energy signatures, growing stronger by the second as they approached through hyperspace. Whatever was coming toward them possessed enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. The gentle current shuddered again as another section of hull peeled away. They were down to emergency life support, huddled in the ship's central core while the rest of their beautiful vessel died around them. Through the transparent sections of the bridge, Velnara could see her crew's emergency pods drifting nearby, tiny bubbles of life containing the 17 survivors who had managed to escape before the main hull breach. Then space exploded into light and fury. The human 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect battle formation, their exit vectors calculated with mathematical precision. The lead vessels emerged first, massive dreadnoughts that could have served as mobile space stations. Behind them came heavy cruisers, their hulls bristling with weapon arrays that tracked potential targets with mechanical hunger. Destroyer squadrons flanked the formation like hunting wolves, their engines burning bright against the darkness. Each vessel was a monument to violence, designed by a species that had learned warfare in the brutal crucible of their own star system. The ships were angular and aggressive, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where Kithra vessels flowed like living art, human warships cut through space like knives through silk. The lead dreadnought Retribution was larger than most space stations, its hull covered in armor plating thick enough to withstand direct hits from antimatter warheads. Weapon batteries dotted its surface like mechanical tumors, each one capable of reducing a small moon to cosmic dust. The ship's reactor signature alone was brighter than some suns. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Jack Morrison stood before the main tactical display, watching as his fleet settled into defensive positions around the anomaly. The bridge was a study in military efficiency, all harsh angles and glowing displays. Officers moved with practiced precision, their voices calm and professional despite the potential for violence that hung in the air like smoke. "Sensor sweep complete, sir," reported Commander Helen Foster from her position at the tactical station. She was a career officer, her uniform bearing the scars and decorations of a dozen conflicts across human space. Single alien vessel, severely damaged. Hull integrity critical. I'm reading 17 life signs in emergency pods. Morrison studied the display with the calculating eyes of a predator. The alien ship was unlike anything in their databases, all flowing curves and organic surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. It was beautiful in an alien way, but beauty could hide weapons just as easily as ugliness. "Energy readings from the alien vessel?" he asked. "Minimal, sir. Whatever they're running on, it's barely keeping life support active. No weapon signatures detected." "Could be a trap," Morrison muttered, his scarred hands clasped behind his back. "Maintain defensive positions. Launch recon drones. I want every inch of this space mapped and analyzed." The order rippled through the fleet with military efficiency. Drone bays opened like hungry mouths, disgorging swarms of unmanned scouts that spread out through the anomaly zone. Each drone was equipped with enough sensors and weapons to qualify as a light fighter in most galactic navies. They moved like a cloud of mechanical insects, probing every shadow and scanning every piece of debris. To Captain Velnara and her terrified crew, watching from their dying ship and fragile emergency pods, The human fleet looked like mechanical nightmares emerging from the depths of space itself. The drones swarmed around them like predatory robots, their sensors painting the Kithra vessels with targeting beams that made their skin crawl. "By the eternal currents," whispered Navigator Kelnaris from her pod, her voice crackling through the emergency communication system. "What manner of beings are these?" The human ships moved with predatory grace, their formations shifting and adapting as they scanned the area. Point defense systems tracked every piece of floating debris with mechanical precision. Shield generators hummed with barely contained energy. The very space around the fleet seemed to vibrate with the promise of violence. Velnara had studied the basic records of the galaxy's newer members, including the species called humans. They were listed as a Level 7 civilization, barely worthy of notice by the great powers. Their homeworld was marked as a death world, too dangerous for civilized beings to visit safely. But this fleet could have conquered half the galaxy. "What have we done?" she whispered, watching as more human vessels continued to arrive. Carrier ships the size of asteroids, their launch bays vomiting forth clouds of fighters. Support vessels that looked more like mobile weapons platforms than rescue ships. Hospital ships that resembled floating fortresses. The humans had sent a war fleet to answer a distress call. And they were still arriving. In the distance, the ancient artifact pulsed with malevolent energy, its gravitational field continuing to tear at the gentle current's remains. But now the artifact seemed like the least of their problems. The human reconnaissance drones swarmed around the Kithra wreckage like a cloud of mechanical vultures, their sensors probing every fragment with ruthless efficiency. Each drone was the size of a small fighter craft, bristling with advanced scanning equipment and defensive weapons. They moved in perfect coordination, mapping every piece of debris down to the molecular level. To Admiral Morrison, watching from the bridge of the Retribution, this was standard protocol. When approaching an unknown situation, you gathered intelligence first. The drones were his eyes and ears, ensuring there were no hidden threats lurking in the wreckage or concealed weapons that could endanger his fleet. To Captain Velnara, trapped in her failing ship's command center, the swarming drones looked like the prelude to an invasion. They circled her vessel like hungry predators, their targeting beams painting her hull with bands of crimson light. Each scan felt like a violation, as if these mechanical monsters were dissecting her beautiful ship piece by piece. "They're analyzing our technology," whispered Tilandra from her station, her luminous patches flickering with terror. "Captain, they're learning our weaknesses." The drones weren't content to simply scan the main wreckage. They darted between the emergency pods where her surviving crew members huddled, cataloging every detail. The pods' organic hulls, designed to protect delicate Kithra physiology, seemed pathetically fragile compared to the armored nightmares surrounding them. On the Retribution's bridge, Commander Helen Foster was reviewing the drone reports with growing confusion. "Sir, these readings don't match any known weapon signatures. The alien ship appears to be some kind of research vessel. Hull composition is unusual. It's partially organic." Admiral Morrison frowned at the tactical display. "Organic? Like a living ship?" "Possibly, sir. The energy patterns suggest biological processes. Very advanced, but definitely not military grade." Morrison's instincts, honed by decades of warfare, were telling him something wasn't right. The alien vessel showed no signs of weapons, no defensive systems beyond basic shields. But appearances could be deceiving. Some of the most dangerous enemies humanity had faced had looked harmless at first glance. "Deploy marine shuttles," he ordered, his voice cutting through the bridge's controlled chaos. "Secure the artifact site and establish a perimeter. I want a full tactical assessment of that alien technology before we make any decisions." The order rippled through the fleet with military precision. Launch bays opened across the human vessels, revealing rows of combat shuttles that had been prepped for immediate deployment. These weren't the graceful, diplomatic vessels used by civilized species for peaceful contact. These were weapons of war. The shuttles launched like bullets from the human ships, their engines blazing bright blue against the darkness of space. Each craft was armored thick enough to survive atmospheric entry on a death world, equipped with enough firepower to punch through a space station's defenses. They moved in tight formation, covering each other's approach vectors with overlapping fields of fire. Commander Ryan Brooks led the first wave, his Marines packed into the assault craft like bullets in a magazine. Each soldier was a veteran of humanity's expansion wars, equipped with powered armor that turned them into walking tanks. Their weapons could slice through ship hulls or vaporize infantry formations with equal efficiency. "Establish security perimeter around the artifact," Brooks transmitted to his squadron leaders. "Standard contact protocol." Assume hostiles until proven otherwise. To the human Marines this was routine. Another day, another potential threat to neutralize. They'd done this dance on 100 worlds against a dozen different species. Move fast, hit hard, control the battlefield before the enemy could respond. But to Captain Velnara watching the armored shuttles racing toward the ancient artifact, it looked like the opening move of a full-scale invasion. The shuttles were heading straight for the mysterious structure that had trapped her ship, the same artifact that had drawn them here for peaceful research. "They're taking the artifact," she gasped, her crystalline fingers trembling as she worked her communications array. "They're going to claim it for themselves?" The ancient artifact hung in space like a frozen nightmare, its impossible geometry defying conventional physics. It was a relic from the dawn of galactic civilization, older than most star systems. Wars had been fought over such artifacts. Entire species had risen to power by unlocking their secrets. Velnara's mind raced through the implications. These Deathworld warriors hadn't come to rescue them. They'd come to steal the artifact, and her distress call had simply provided them with a convenient excuse to deploy their war fleet without triggering a galactic incident. With shaking hands, she opened an emergency channel to any galactic vessel within range. Her transmission burst out across subspace frequencies, carrying the desperate plea of a dying crew to anyone who might listen. "Emergency," she broadcast, her voice tight with terror. "This is Captain Velnara of the Kithra research vessel Gentle Current. Unknown Deathworld species has responded to our distress call with a war fleet. 300 vessels. They're preparing to attack. The humans have sent an invasion force. Please someone help us before they—" The transmission cut off as another power conduit failed, plunging half the bridge into darkness. Meanwhile, in the Retribution's communication center, Doctor and Palmer was working frantically to decode the original alien distress signal. Something about the situation wasn't adding up. The alien vessel showed no weapons, no signs of military capability. Yet their first contact protocols were based on the assumption that any unknown contact could be hostile. She ran the signal through the translation matrix again, this time using civilian rather than military interpretation protocols. The results made her blood run cold. "Admiral," she called urgently across the communication center, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the command deck. "I think we've made a mistake. This wasn't a threat assessment. It was a cry for help." But her words were lost in the noise of military efficiency. Half the fleet was now convinced they were dealing with an elaborate trap, possibly a lure designed to draw human forces away from their colonies. The other half was beginning to suspect the horrible truth, but military momentum was a powerful force. The Marine shuttles were already approaching the artifact, their weapons hot and ready. The reconnaissance drones continued their relentless scanning. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Captain Velnara's desperate transmission was racing toward the galactic core, carrying news of humanity's first major diplomatic incident since joining the galactic community. Doctor and Palmer finally managed to get Admiral Morrison's attention as chaos erupted across the communication channels. Reports were flooding in from Marine units, reconnaissance drones, and ship commanders, all trying to make sense of the increasingly confusing situation. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Palmer insisted, pushing through the crowd of officers surrounding the tactical display. She was the fleet's chief xenolinguist, a specialist in alien communication protocols who had joined the expedition specifically to help humanity navigate the complex web of galactic diplomacy. Morrison looked up from a report about the artifact's energy readings. "What is it, Doctor?" "The original signal, sir. I've run it through every translation protocol we have. It's not a military communication. It's a standard civilian distress call, requesting humanitarian assistance. They're asking for help, not threatening us." Morrison studied her findings, his weathered face creasing with concern. Around them, the bridge continued its controlled chaos as officers coordinated the massive fleet deployment. 300 ships didn't just sit idle in space. They required constant management, constant vigilance. "Are you certain?" he asked. "As certain as I can be with an alien language, sir. The mathematical harmonics, the frequency patterns, even the transmission method all match standard galactic rescue protocols. They're not hiding anything. They're dying." Morrison looked out at the main display, where the fragmented alien vessel continued to fall apart in the gravitational anomaly. The reconnaissance drones had confirmed that the ship was indeed defenseless, its crew trapped in emergency pods that were failing one by one. "Stand down weapons," he ordered. "Prep a contact team. Full diplomatic protocols." But human diplomatic protocols were still human protocols. In the 2 centuries since humanity had left Earth, They had learned that appearing weak during first contact usually led to slavery, exploitation, or death. Every species they had encountered had tested them, probed for weakness, attempted to dominate them through force or cunning. The contact shuttle that launched from the Retribution was armored like a battleship and armed like a gunship. Commander Kevin Blake led the diplomatic team, but his idea of diplomacy still involved wearing full combat armor and carrying enough firepower to level a city block. Dr. Palmer accompanied him, along with a full squad of Marines and enough support equipment to establish a fortified base camp. "Remember," Palmer briefed the team as they approached the alien vessel, "these beings are physically fragile compared to us. Be careful not to damage their ship or equipment. Move slowly, speak softly, and for God's sake, don't point any weapons at them." The Kythera emergency habitat was a marvel of organic engineering, grown rather than built from living crystal that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. As the human shuttle docked with the alien vessel, the difference in construction philosophy became immediately apparent. Where human ships were built like fortresses, the Kythera craft resembled a work of art. When the airlock cycled open, the environmental differences hit them immediately. The atmosphere was thinner, the gravity lighter, the very air filled with microscopic spores that made their equipment readings fluctuate wildly. Commander Blake had to adjust his suit's settings to avoid overwhelming the delicate alien sensors with electromagnetic radiation. The human delegation stepped through the airlock, and the contrast was stark. Blake, even in his dress uniform beneath the powered armor, moved like a predator among the ethereal Kythera. His heavy footsteps, designed for the crushing gravity of human worlds, cracked the delicate deck plating that had been grown to support beings lighter than air. The radiation from their equipment, harmless to humans but intense by galactic standards, made the aliens' bioluminescent patches flicker and dim like candles in a windstorm. The very air around the humans seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy from their power sources. Captain Velnara waited in what remained of her ship's command center, supported by emergency life support systems that wheezed and sparked with each breath. She was beautiful in an alien way, her crystalline body catching and reflecting the emergency lighting in patterns that hurt human eyes to follow. "We received your distress call," Dr. Palmer said carefully, her words filtered through the universal translator and modulated to frequencies that wouldn't shatter Kythera hearing organs. "We're here to help." But even as she spoke, Palmer was aware of how the words must sound. Behind her, armed Marines took defensive positions around the chamber. Their weapons, powered down but still active, hummed with enough energy to vaporize the entire alien crew. Their armor, designed to survive in the vacuum of space or the crushing depths of gas giants, made them look like mechanical demons in the soft lighting of the organic ship. Captain Velnara stared at the humans with growing understanding and horror. These beings were living weapons, engineered by evolution and enhanced by technology into the perfect soldiers. Their bones were denser than Kythera armor plating. Their muscles could crush her limbs without conscious effort. They radiated the casual lethality of apex predators who had never known what it meant to be prey. "You came to help?" Velnara whispered, her voice barely audible through the translation matrix. "Of course," Palmer replied, genuinely confused by the question. "You sent a distress signal. Standard galactic protocols require us to respond to civilian emergencies." The terrible truth crashed over Velnara like a wave of ice water. This wasn't conquest. This wasn't an invasion or a theft of the ancient artifact. This was how they helped. The entire terrifying fleet, the overwhelming firepower, the military precision that had seemed so threatening, this was their version of a rescue mission. The humans had brought 300 warships to save 17 alien researchers because that was the only way they knew how to respond to an emergency. In their violent galaxy, in their brutal star system, you didn't survive by sending token forces or making half-hearted efforts. You survived by bringing overwhelming force and making sure nothing could threaten the people you were trying to save. "Your ship is failing," Commander Blake observed, his tactical systems automatically cataloging the damage around them. "We need to evacuate your crew immediately. Our medical facilities can sustain your life support requirements." Even their offer of help sounded like a military operation because to humans, that's exactly what it was. In their world, rescue and warfare used the same tools, the same planning, the same ruthless efficiency that had kept humanity alive in a galaxy full of threats. And for the first time since the human fleet had arrived, Captain Velnara felt something other than terror. She felt hope. The rescue operation that followed became a legendary example of human efficiency applied to an impossible situation. What should have been a delicate extraction requiring specialized equipment and months of planning became a masterclass in organized chaos that somehow worked perfectly. Chief Petty Officer Billy Harrison led the engineering team aboard the dying Gentle Current, his heavy boots leaving small cracks in the organic deck plating with each step. Harrison was a veteran of deep space construction, a man who had built mining stations in asteroid fields and repaired battleships while under enemy fire. To him, the failing Kithra vessel was just another engineering challenge. "The ship's dying," he reported to Commander Blake over the comm system. "But it's dying slowly. The organic systems are trying to heal themselves, but they don't have enough power." Harrison's team worked with the brutal efficiency that marked all human emergency responses. They ripped out failing bioconduits and replaced them with human power cables. They bypassed elegant Kithra control systems with crude but reliable human electronics. Where the aliens had grown their ship with artistic beauty, the humans patched it together with pragmatic ugliness that actually worked. "It's not pretty," Harrison muttered to his assistant, Corporal Janet Mitchell, as they jury-rigged another power coupling. "But pretty doesn't keep people breathing." The Kithra watched in fascination and horror as the humans essentially performed surgery on their living ship. What took their bioengineers months of careful cultivation, the humans accomplished in hours with industrial-grade equipment and a complete disregard for aesthetic considerations. Meanwhile, in the medical bay of the human hospital ship Florence, Dr. Rachel Stone was facing the greatest challenge of her career. Human emergency medicine was designed for tough, resilient patients who could survive treatments that would kill most galactic species. Adapting those techniques for beings whose bodies were more art than biology required a complete rethinking of medical protocols. "Their cellular structure is crystalline," she explained to her medical team as they prepared treatment chambers for the Kithra survivors. "Think of them as living glass sculptures. Everything we do has to be gentle enough not to shatter them, but aggressive enough to actually save their lives." The human medical team worked around the clock, designing specialized treatment pods that could sustain Kithra physiology while their own ship's systems failed. They created atmospheric processors that could maintain the precise gas mixtures the aliens needed. They developed nutrient solutions that could feed crystalline biology without causing toxic reactions. When Navigator Kelnaris arrived at the medical bay, her translucent body flickering with the dim light of approaching death, the human medical team performed what could only be described as a miracle. They stabilized her failing bioluminescent organs, repaired microscopic fractures in her crystalline skeleton, and restored the delicate chemical balance that kept her consciousness functioning. "How?" she whispered to Dr. Stone through the universal translator as her strength returned. "Your medicine is designed for beings like you. How can you heal us?" Dr. Stone smiled, exhaustion evident in her eyes after 18 hours of continuous surgery. "Because healing is healing. The techniques change but the goal remains the same. We adapt." Outside the medical bay, human Marines had established a security perimeter around the ancient artifact that had started this entire incident. To any outside observer, it looked like an occupation force taking control of a strategic asset. Squads of armored soldiers patrolled the area while heavy weapons platforms maintained constant watch over the mysterious structure. But Captain Velnara, observing from her recovery chamber, finally understood what she was really seeing. The human weapons weren't pointed at the artifact or at her people. They were pointed outward, toward the empty spaces where potential threats might emerge. The Marines weren't occupying the artifact. They were protecting it. "Your people stand guard," she said to Commander Blake during one of his visits to check on the survivors. "But guard against what?" Blake looked puzzled by the question. "Against anything that might try to interfere with the research operation. Pirates, hostile governments, scavenger fleets. The galaxy's full of people who would kill you for access to that artifact. We're making sure they can't." The joint research protocols that followed became a model for human-alien cooperation. Kithra scientists, masters of organic technology and harmonic engineering, worked alongside human researchers who brought their own brutal efficiency to the study of ancient mysteries. The artifact revealed its secrets slowly, but it revealed them safely under the protection of human firepower. Word of the human incident spread through the galactic community like wildfire. The story grew in the telling, becoming both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. The Deathworlders had sent an entire battle fleet in response to a simple rescue request, and somehow made it work through sheer overwhelming competence and determination. The Galactic Rescue Service, after lengthy deliberations and several diplomatic protests, updated their emergency protocols with a special addendum. When requesting aid from Terra, specify humanitarian assistance only. Otherwise, they will assume you need them to destroy something and will arrive prepared to do so efficiently and thoroughly. This is not malicious intent. This is simply how they show they care. 3 months later, in her private quarters aboard the human research station that had been built around the artifact, Captain Velnara kept a small human military insignia on her desk. It was a simple thing, a piece of metal with geometric designs, but it represented something profound. It was a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying response could also be the most compassionate one. Admiral Morrison filed his after-action report with typical human efficiency. Mission accomplished. 17 civilian lives saved. Ancient artifact secured for joint research. No hostile contacts. Recommend updating first contact procedures to prevent future misunderstandings. He never understood why the aliens seemed so surprised by what he considered a simple rescue operation. To him, it was just another day in the human fleet, another problem solved with determination and overwhelming force. VND.